So, folks, when we talk about socialism, power, political will, um, I think the best place for us to start is, with Marx, right? So we have the Communist Manifesto. We have like the establishment of like, hey guys, here's kind of an overview of how capital works, how the relationship between bosses and employees functions, and we have one of the biggest and most in-depth evaluations of that relationship um, up to that point in history, right? So we have basically Karl Marx being the guy who sat down and actually thought through, how does this power dynamic work? How does this affect the flow of capital? How does this actually function? And a lot of people, even to this day, still see that basic examination and description as a threat, right? So, and I'm giving you guys very basic ideas here, but essentially, Karl Marx put forward the labor theory of value, the idea that labor generates value, and then that excess value, if you are in kind of a wage slave dynamic where you accept a wage for your labor, that value, that excess value of what you created, goes to your boss. Like that, it gets siphoned up into the capitalist structure, right? And so when we talk about this, understand that the basic premise of Marx is just a description of capital, how it works, how it flows. This is what leads over time to a consolidation of wealth, and now we have, people with hundreds of billions of dollars reigning as oligarchs, right? And you have this kind of codification, and then like the idea around it kind of becomes known as communism. And communism is this idea that like, well, maybe we should reevaluate this, boss and employee, employer-employee relationship. Maybe we should, instead of siphoning all of this power up to the tippy top of society, consolidating it and consolidating it and consolidating it, maybe instead we have a different kind of working paradigm where workers control their own workplaces, right? The workers own the factory rather than, a guy or a group of guys own the factory. And, Marx and Engels, the Communist Manifesto kind of puts forward these basic ideas. And like further elaborations, like the abolishment of the commodity form, money, the the fading away of the state, etc., to kind of minimize or eliminate to the greatest possible extent, the coercive elements on your life to force you to do things you don't want to do, right? So, you have this idea put forward, right? And over the next, 150 some years, you have a lot of other people adding to that, attempting to implement it, with varying degrees of success.
I don't care to belong to a club that accepts people like me as members, which is why I reject capitalism and the bourgeoisie. Groucho K. Marx, BWA legend.
Paladin Lost, thank you for the 25 gifted subs. I very, very much appreciate that.
Do you want to tank? Do you want to fight? Do you want a class that'll instill fright? Take up some plate and keep the goblins inside, because you want to make sure they eat this paladin smite! Fuck you, gods. If you want me to play your game of ethics, you can kiss my shiny plate mail. Alright, fine. Wait a minute, what the hell is that noise?
There we go. Over half of the way towards our goal, our initial goal. Let's go, folks. Keep up that energy. Thank you so, so much, Paladin. Your support for this show means the world. Thank you for helping me to keep on going. I appreciate it very, very much. So one of the things you have to understand is that you had a couple of different approaches. And we're going to take a look at a video pretty soon with Richard Wolff where he describes these two different approaches. And it was something of like an epiphany for me, that video today. And I think it's pretty important. So we'll go over it together. But you had two different wings kind of emerge out of the communist movement, right? You had this wing that pushed for revolution, often violent revolution, and you had a wing that pushed for evolutionary communism. Essentially, like the idea that you can, through iterative democratic reforms, move towards progressively towards a more equitable future for all. You know, that world where the workers, you know, collectively own their workplaces, or have additional agency, are able to live, love, and thrive as they will. And you have this divergence, right? And that divergence I had historically considered a part of like the
Das Capital, Das lowercase.
Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. I very much appreciate that. Getting us closer to our goal. 33. There we go. 17 subs. Yeah, you know, the working folk, they all yearn to live, laugh, love. Okay. And so, like, a lot of people view this divergence in terms of those two different paths. And I've long have kind of held the idea that revolutionary politics inevitably needs to embrace violence, right? Like, that kind of seems to have been like the, you know, you got to overthrow the czar, you know, you got to overthrow the czar. That's eventually what leads to Soviet politics. And one thing that I hate above all else is authoritarianism. I think like ceding all power to the state leads to potentially some pretty negative outcomes, right? And so a lot of people, by the way, think in that same way. And another really good example of kind of the other branch is the United States, where we adopted iterative reform under FDR and the New Deal, right? And so Richard Wolff goes through a lot of this in a really interesting way from kind of that basis of understanding, right? And I think it's really important to understand that basically these two forces didn't just exist. It's not like all the revolutionaries are in Russia and all of the reformists are in the United States. No, both elements existed in both places, right? And they've existed in the United States as well, right? And I've talked about this before on stream and why I'm not like super big on FDR. And it's because FDR essentially made a compromise with the forces of capital, and that compromise is what leads us to where we are right now. The reason FDR compromised with capital is specifically because he was a capitalist, right? And at the time in America, there was this growing workers' rights movement. You know, this was the same kind of fervor and dedication to a movement, to a cause that moved and created things like public schooling, right?
The trouble with revolutionary politics is that they're always turning on you.
I understood the pun. I like it. Your wordplay is enjoyable, Sake. Thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. So FDR essentially was under pressure from two different places, right? He was under pressure from like the leftovers, the holdovers of like the robber baron era, and he was also beholden to this growing workers' rights movement. You know, your Eugene Debs and such. And they were a very real and growing threat to the establishment status quo in FDR's time, right? And so FDR made a compromise and essentially said, we're going to break down a lot of the power of these capitalistic enterprises. We are going to, we're going to provide social safety net, this New Deal, and that's going to be kind of the new global paradigm, right? It's like a bunch of people are going to get really, really wealthy, and essentially that then put in place this reformist series of events into motion. And that in turn is what allows us to get to today, where that reform movement promised by the New Deal has been, chipped away by corporate power, by billionaire power, and the ghosts of the robber barons past still walk among us. These 100 billionaires that control our country, right? And so they have been enacting this policy of privatization in order to gut the reforms that were promised by the New Deal. Either halting them in their tracks, and you can look at like the federal minimum wage for that, or you can also take a look at just the ways in which lobbyist money really plays a role in our politics now in the wake of Citizens United being the law of the land, right? And so we're gonna talk more about this as we go along, but understand that in my worldview, money is power. It is not merely a medium. It is potential, right? It is a potential of enacting power in a million different ways. And the more money you have, the more money you consolidate, the more capital you possess, the more you can do for good or for ill, right? And so one of the ways we need to understand what is happening is not just a consolidation of money in like the sense of cash, but consolidation of money in the sense of it is power.
Evil squared equals money.
True. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. I very, very much appreciate that. Also, does anyone have questions about what I've put forward so far? Do you guys understand kind of the points I'm laying out here? What do you mean, ghosts? I mean, descendants, the degraded spawn of the nation's great men. Kind of the Morlocks of the robber barons. The math adds up. Think so. Hello, Amber Brains. Socialism. This isn't what I signed up for when I subscribed to the channel. Yeah, and also over time, socialism kind of became... Sorry, I missed that part. Communism kind of became associated with like the more revolutionary elements, and socialism became more associated with the evolutionary parts of the party. How do you propose we move forward as a country, given the situation we're in? As in, what is the most desirable outcome in your mind? I mean, the most desirable outcome in my mind is that a critical mass of people become engaged in the democratic process and in protesting. A critical mass of people that is then able to propel, people who genuinely want to do shit about our problems into power, and can get a massive number of reforms passed in a relatively short amount of time to heal the wounds of this country and to like fix our policy positions. Like, I want to get a critical mass of people engaged in the political process so that we can like have the political will and power to end the genocide in Gaza. Like we need to hit like that kind of critical mass in order to do just the things that we have traditionally been like, it just takes too long. There's too much red tape or whatever, there's just not enough political will to do it. And shocker of all shocks, guys, but if we have, 100 million people marching in this country, there is nothing we can't do. Do you want Medicare for all? 100 million people in the streets is going to get it for you. Like, that's kind of the way out of this, is to make it clear that we as a people reject these corporate oligarchs and the ghoul that is Donald Trump. And the only way we hold them to account sooner than 2028 is if we all start coordinating en masse in the streets. You know, like that's kind of the name of the game. It is mass mobilization. You know?
You know, the literal eggheads and felons who own American businesses.
Yep. Nine-Tailed Witch, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. And so, like, the way out of this is not going to be Democrats. I don't think Democrats are going to save us. I think that there is currently an ongoing struggle within the Democratic Party for which way they're going to go. Like, are they going to be do something Dems, or are they going to be do nothing Dems? And that decision is going to, either they choose to do something, in which case I think things will be relatively okay, or they choose to do nothing, and then I think, like, you get people
Did you
pulling
cover
the
Sam
Democratic Party
versus
apart.
Klein? That was popcorn content.
I have not done that yet, but this is leading up to talking about that. I promise. Also, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs, Sake Tanuki. Appreciated. I'm following the Indivisible movement, uproot the Democratic Party. Yeah, I mean, this is why I've been telling you guys to get involved with your local Democratic Party. It's so that you guys can take over your local Democratic parties. It's so that you guys can, radicalize your local Dems into a more effective force of people that will do things politically. So just so I understand, strength in numbers and mass mobilization. Yeah, because frankly, Democrats are cowards. And without that mass mobilization, without that mass engagement in politics, without the very clear message that to go against this political will is political suicide, essentially, like, they're not going to just do the right thing out of the goodness of their hearts. Unfortunately, we don't, the people in Congress right now are not all Bernie Sanders, people with, genuinely good intention forged over the course of, 5 decades. A lot of them are just, they're in it for the paycheck. And so essentially what I think the only path forward through this particular political time in which we are able to hold the country together, I think the best likelihood for that is getting as many people engaged in the political process as possible. And that's why I've been really adamant about the fact that if like Donald Trump trying to pass these Medicaid cuts, $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid,
I do love me
it's
some
gonna be
spirit
hard.
science, BWA and all that jazz.
Very knifey duck. Thank you for the $5 dono. I very, very much appreciate that. And we've now hit 50 subs, and we will continue to our trek to 100. Plant, thank you for gifting a sub on Twitch. I appreciate that as well. That goes into our counter. And we will do some spirit science after I finish up just some last minute thoughts to kind of get us through part 1 of kind of where I come from on this, right? That won't happen for a while. Here, the thing is, I think that the Trump administration is trying to go too hard, too fast. And if they try to cut Medicaid by this much, people will view it as an existential threat. And it is for millions and millions of people, right? And they're trying to kick people off of food assistance, the thing that allows them to have food. They're trying to kick people out of their housing. They're trying to kick people off of their health care. And like, frankly, that tends to be really, really, really unpopular, both with the people who are directly affected, obviously, but also to their loved ones, because they're not just isolated from the rest of the world. And so these types of actions, I don't know if we are going to have mobilized enough people by the time the budget vote, the final budget votes happen, right? I hope so. But if we don't, and the budget goes into effect, like, people are going to be radicalized by that. Like, I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, whatever. Like, if your family member loses their health care or suddenly has, $30,000 per month bills that they can't pay, like, because their Medicaid is gone, that's going to radicalize basically anybody. You know, like, and that's going to be one of the fastest felt effects, but there are going to be others. You know, we already are going to be feeling the effects of these tariffs soon. And we're like, it's just going to compound. And like, Trump supporters are going to be hit potentially among the hardest in all of this. And it will be a time when conservatives are being radicalized into lefties, you know? That's essentially what's going to happen. Like, when we're talking like cuts to Medicaid, cuts to Social Security, we're talking like, you know, cuts that will, if people don't get their checks, potentially kill them, you know? Any idea why they're being so fast and loose with it? Is it just cruelty, or do you think it's because they want to get it done as fast as they can? They want to get it done as fast as they can, but part of the problem is they know it's not that the cruelty is the point to them. They just know that it's their ass, right? So you have people in contested districts like Mike Lawler who are going out and saying, oh, maybe we shouldn't, I don't support this budget because, you know, maybe we shouldn't cut Medicaid. Haha. And because he's basically getting nonstop calls about how he's been promising there will be no cuts to Medicaid, and the amount of cuts to Medicaid on the table right now are, you know, almost all of its budget. And so the coalition of Republicans around this is fracturing, which is why they've been trying to move it through faster, and why it's good anytime Democrats slow down the process. It's because, like, they only have a short window before, like, Republican lawmakers start to panic and break, you know? And so, yeah. How we get to this point is a story of power. It's a story of power being utilized to consolidate more power, right? And what the billionaire donors of the Republican Party want are those tax breaks. Because instead of using the power of the state to keep millions of people alive and on their health insurance, Republicans want to use the power of the state to just empower the richest people on the planet, the most powerful people on the planet. That is essentially what is happening with this wealth transfer from the poorest people in the country to the strongest and the, most powerful people. So there you go. How do we avoid this movement? How do we avoid this movement won't lead to an even worse authoritarian state, as the cynical parts of me fear we as leftists might end up building? You might need to rephrase the question. I'm not entirely sure. Like, how do we avoid? Are you asking, like, how do we avoid the potential of, like, our leftist backlash against this leading to, like, an authoritarian state a la Soviet Russia? Is that kind of your question? Yeah, how do we not do Stalinism? Is that it? Yes? Okay. I mean, genuinely, it is that we don't just capitulate the strongmen, Like, the entire premise is that we maintain the mechanisms of our democracy, and we hold fast to that as a guiding point. We don't negotiate to give that up because it might be more convenient. Part of the thinking of making the Soviet Union more of a authoritarian state was to streamline that decision-making process, to be able to put policy into action faster. But that comes with enormously massive downsides, and that also puts all of us at risk. And so I think under no circumstances can we cede our democratic apparatuses. I think democracy is really important in governance, and I think democracy is really important in the workplace. And I think putting it in terms of we want more democracy, not less, is something that's really important. Yeah, they called it democratic centralism but like I reject centralizing power in that way. You know? And because I think centralizing power into like AI is bad. It's bad when we're trying to do it with AI and the state. And it's essentially what Trump is trying to do right now. I think we have like a duty when we take power to enact massive amounts of reforms and to do like, you know, for there to be like a, I don't know, a look at where we're at and what we need. As Tim Walz has been saying at his town halls that he's been doing around the country, like, people are going to expect something out of this. And it's going to be, you know, stuff like Medicare for all. It's going to be like genuine flag in the dirt progress on a number of issues that have been ruining our lives for generations. You know? So that's kind of where I'm at with all this. And let's, you know, with that, I did not expect to go on so long kind of with this overview, but I hope that kind of helps you guys understand where I'm coming from, helps you guys kind of understand my view of power and how that relates to the economy and how that relates to government. I hope that all helps.
Riverboat deck is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.